And the decision of whom becomes the next Minister of Youth Development is still one President Bola Tinubu has to contend with. Just recently, the Senate committee completed the screening process for 48 ministerial nominees, out of which 45 have been confirmed and sworn in. Recall that some days ago, President Tinubu redeployed Abubakar Momoh from the Federal Ministry of Youth to the Federal Ministry of the Niger Delta Development. Now the youths are clamoring for the position to be occupied by another youth to create a balance in the political system of governance. They believe that their demand serves as a testament to their determination to actively shape the future of their country. Let's talk this through by speaking with President Yewa Awori Youth Council Abayomi Oke Ashiwaju. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Good morning.
It's good to see you.
Yeah.
I love your attire.
Thank you. I love yours too.
I hope you're not positioning yourself for
something like that. So you may possibly see my poster soon.
I've also got a strategy consultant and public affairs analyst, Kenny Adenugba. Thank you so much for joining us.
It's good to be here this morning. Thank you.
Right, let's get talking. It's been generating a lot of controversies as to who should be the Minister of Youth. Because if the president have this, thought it through that, okay, we should, change the one that I already appointed, that's the Abubakar Momoh. So who does the cap fit?
Okay, interesting question. Let me first establish this fact that if young people occupy all the 45 ministerial positions that we have now, it's not out of place. That needs to be established. And because in the past, we've had cases of where people under 30, under 40 had manned ministerial positions before in this country. So it's not out of place for young people to actually occupy that position or positions, as the case may be. And that is why, most importantly, if we can get all, at least the youth ministry must be manned by somebody that can be classified as a young person, as a youth. Yes, different charters have defined who a youth should be. The African Youth Charter is the only one that even extended to 35 years. But of course, we understand that it may not be realistic to possibly get a 35-year-old man, though it's not as if it's not possible. But, at least for now, if you still extend it to 40 or 40 plus, mid-40s, I think it's still fine. Now, what are the qualifications? What should we look at? We should look for somebody who understands what that ministry is all about. I'm glad that they've separated the Ministry of Youth from the Ministry of Sport, because all this while, sporting activities have actually taken over that Ministry of Youth and Sport, to the extent that most ministers feel that their primary responsibility is to ensure that sporting activities thrive in the country. And that's why in the headlines you see Minister of Youth talk about NFF, talk about sponsoring our players, to play abroad and all that. And also, probably because sports is a very, very lucrative exercise, because it's easy to make more money there. Because truly, youth development seems to be intangible. You can't possibly say, I'm constructing roads, like, I'm building this, I'm building that. It's more of intangible, quite
a lot of creativity.
Yes. So now, anyone who wants to be the Minister of Youth should be ready to address the challenges of youth, part of which is unemployment. Not just unemployment. Human resource professionals have now discovered that we even have many unemployable youths. So if you are addressing this, that means there must be a robust handshake with even other ministries, such as Ministry of Education. So as a youth minister, you can't work in isolation. You must work with other ministries to ensure that, one, we address the issue of not just unemployment, but unemployability. That is, these young people that are coming out from our schools, are they really qualified to be engaged by their employers? Right. Secondly, imbalance in the way of there's economic imbalances here and there. You must be able to bridge that gap. And you must be able to think about the future for the young people. Because if they say truly the future belongs to the youth, then the youth minister must be somebody that has foresight, must be able to think into the future and create plans that will ensure that a Nigerian youth will not just believe in himself or herself alone, we also believe that this country, Nigeria, has something in stock for him or her.
So, Kenny, you know, when this issue became something that, you know, has been on the tongue of many Nigerians, saying who should be the youth minister, because a lot of time you had people who are even older than others, you know, older than 50, 60. For instance, Abubakar Momoh, they said he's in about his 60s or thereabout. So what kind of qualities do you think the person who will be holding this position should have in order to reflect the diversity of Nigeria? Because you can't say this is a youth, but then such should also reflect the diversity of this country.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, you must understand, he said certain things actually, which I agree with him. And then, interestingly, he was looking more at, he mentioned must be a man who, whatever.
Right.
And that's, so for me, I'd ask myself immediately, does a person have to be a man? Really? Let us ask ourselves.
Right.
So the natural tendency is to think, okay, when you're talking about that, you want to see a man there, or a young man there. It doesn't have to be. That's the first thing. And secondly, we must look at what are the strategic imperatives that are required for this person who would be the youth minister. Like I said, there are a number of things that the youth ministry cannot do in isolation. The minister can't do in isolation. He has to work with Ministry of Education, like he said. Has to be somebody who actually is able to also pull the people. It must be someone that the youth actually can look at and find leadership. And leadership is critical in all of this. There are quite a number of things going on out there about people now turning into a campaign matter, which I think is totally out of it anyway. I don't want to go into that immediately. But you must, a youth minister must be someone that actually has that leadership quality. And of course, we're not bereft, like I said, we are not bereft of having youths leading us over the years. People under 30 or even under 40. I mean, we've had a head of state or thereabout, a head of state that have been under 40. Yeah. We've had ministers over the years. We've had governors who had been under 40 when they took over office. So it's not as if there is no youth had not been there. However, for this particular ministry, it's the first time we're going to have a ministry of youth that is a standalone. And that is a fantastic opportunity to be able to build the future that we are looking at. You can't build a future without the youth. And how do we begin to do that? It is having a ministry that actually focuses on the youth. What are the strategic imperatives? What are the things that need to be done? This person who is coming in must be somebody who has a future, who thinks about the future, who leads into the future. Not just about somebody who thinks politically. You see, because along the line, if you're not careful, you're taking somebody who actually is thinking politically to say, oh, it's all about politics. No, it's about the youth. What do you have in stock for them? Where do you want to take the youth? It's not just about talking. You know, this is not an Aluta matter. No, it's not a student union Aluta matter. It's about what plans can we put on to ensure that the next generation are able to actually hold this nation and own the nation. Now, creative economy is there. Digital economy is there. These are ministries. I mean, arts, culture, and creative economy is a ministry now, which is also good. Taking it away, I mean, breaking away from information and culture. So culture now stands, same with tourism. So, don't forget that youth also have things to do with tourism. We must also begin to look at how do we arrest the brain drain, the Japa syndrome, so to say. And if there is no encouragement for the youth, they will keep looking elsewhere. Interesting thing is that the grass doesn't have to be greener on the other side. So, but we must have a youth minister who is able to actually gain the confidence of the youth to say, with this person, we know that there is something in this government for us, there's something in the nation for us. Somebody who will hit the ground running and begin to look at how to be able to ensure that the youths are able to come into their own. Like he said, a lot of youths, we're talking about unemployment. How about employability? Now, working in a way that we begin to actually harness the strength of the youth to ensure that even when some don't have university degrees, there are things that they can do within the economy to be able to, make something worthwhile for themselves.
I can actually deduce from, both of your submissions that, it's just like you said, it's more like intangible, but then they should be able to do something that is quite tangible for people to be able to see. But then it can't. It also appears that it can't stand alone, where you have it interconnected. Its interconnectedness with the Ministry of Sports. It has arts and culture, etc. So you can't separate all of this from the youth. But then, how do we now begin to formulate the ideas, the deliverables for the Minister of Youth? What exactly are the things that he should really do?
Okay, I ended my initial statement with the fact that one, a youth minister must be able to, ensure that Nigerians, especially Nigerian youths, begin to believe not just in themselves, but believe in this country. He mentioned the Japa syndrome, because the belief out there is that this country seems not to care so much about the
brain drain.
The brain drain, even about young people most especially. And because of that loss of confidence, now you see people seeking greener pastures elsewhere, even where the land is not even green.
Not green, yeah.
Sincerely, because it's somehow that some countries of choice for these our young people baffles me. That they just want to leave the country. So the youth minister must ensure that, yes, of course, it's intangible, but must ensure that he instills that culture of one patriotism. And where it starts from is that this country must give more to the people. You must show significant interest in the development of young people, right from the toddler age to the developing age, the one we call teenage years and all that. You must show significant interest that you cater, you care for these people, you love them truly. In terms of educational infrastructure, for example, if I attend a school where there is no latrine, no toilet, which some of us actually attended, you have just told me that excreting probably by the roadside or urinating by the roadside should be a norm. But if you have created that infrastructure in place, if you have put that infrastructure in place in my school, I would grow up to know that doing this is abnormal. That means excreting by the roadside, dumping refuse, and all that is not normal. So these are some of the things that we need to put in. That's why I said a youth minister needs to work with other ministries. Work with the Ministry of Works, work with the Ministry of Transportation. In fact, I'm also glad that the creative industry is also standing alone now. You have to work with that, because one of the things that sells now in the country is entertainment. However, it also has to be channeled properly. Now, we have a very, very serious issue on ground. Drug abuse. Who are the perpetrators? Who are the victims? Young people. So, if any youth minister is coming on board, that youth minister must also live aboard in terms of character. If you are the type that allows, or you yourself, you are a key stakeholder in cultism, drug abuse, and all other social vices, it will be very difficult for you to fight such. So it simply means that you must live above board, and you must be ready to work with other ministries to ensure that young people believe in this country.
Right. So Southwest Youth Forum actually believe that it should come from, that the youth minister should come from the Southwest. And we already have ministers already who have taken their oath. Do you also subscribe to the fact that it should come from the Southwest?
Well,
I love the fact, I love that you send a wake-up call that it should not only be the male folks. Why don't we have from the female folks?
Absolutely. Well, for me, you see, sometimes the issue of where someone comes from can actually also deprive us of the very best if we're not careful sometimes. So somebody saying, let it come from the Southwest and what have you, I don't think that should be an issue. The most important thing is we're all Nigerians. We must understand that first and foremost. If you look at the list of the current ministers, the distribution across geopolitical zones already gave Southwest about 8 or 9. 9. You have the I think Northwest has 10 or thereabout. So that means you're saying that if you get it from the Southwest, you have 10. Southwest 10, same with Northwest. Well, it's not an issue. However, for me, it's not about who comes from in this particular regard. It's more, except it's somebody is saying that it's already zoned within the party or whatever, but that is not the major issue for me. The major issue is, can this person deliver on the requirements and what it takes to actually take the youth into the next level, build capacity for the future, lead them into the future, begin to work out the momentum for them, and change orientation, because there's a need for a lot of reorientation of our youths. A lot of them actually sit on X, which formerly called Twitter. And that is where you see all manner of things. There's a culture of a cancel culture that needs to be taken out of our system, particularly for our youth. So a lot of things has to be done. So for me, thinking of who comes from, and that part with the ministry is not the major issue for me. It's more about who can deliver to ensure that the youths actually have focus. They have focus, and they are able to actually begin to build a life for themselves within the nation. That is more critical. And I'm glad that this government actually thinks about the youths, particularly, and more importantly, because otherwise there wouldn't be that separation to say, okay, you know what, let's begin to build, because we all also realize that a number of things had gone wrong when civic education was taken out of our systems. From primary school, I remember very well, we had civic education, we have a whole lot of stuff. History was taken out at a point. But when we bring back some of these things, the duty of a citizen becomes more paramount in the minds of the youth. They see themselves as citizens who are ready to contribute to the general well-being of the nation and the economic development. But where there is that disillusionment and where there is that disconnect, it becomes a problem. So that minister must be somebody who is a connector, and who is able to build bridges, and who has capacity to be able to build relationships. Absolutely. Not just with the youth, but also it must be between the youth and those who are younger, the toddlers, the teenagers, because that's where it starts from. That's right. It must be somebody who is able to go down there to also begin to look at those levels of young generation that are going to become youths in the next 10, 15 years, while also building relationship with those who are above the youth level, to be able to harness the grace and the wisdom. Because we always said, where I come from, that even if a child has so much clothes, like beyond the elders' own, you can't have rags as much as the elders. So in a way, there has to be that person who can connect, not about where somebody comes from, not at this point.
That being said, beyond your region, beyond character, competence, and capacity, what exactly should we not look beyond the fact that whether you're a man or a woman? Why don't we talk about persons, living with disabilities? Because we often talk about, okay, this is the person who wants to represent us, but it's either the person is a man or a woman. But what about the person with disabilities? Because they also want to feel that representation. They also want to be part of the government. I'm not sure any of them is represented currently in this current cabinet. So why don't we talk about that? Do you feel it might be a difficult task for someone, for a person with disabilities to be able to do this?
Sincerely speaking, I do not see manning a ministry as something that should be out of place for people with disabilities, depending on the disability anyway. I currently am a fellow of the Emerging Political Leaders Fellowship, and I'm aware that we have someone among us who is actually, someone with disability, but with a lot of abilities. And interestingly, she's from the female gender. Now, it goes to show that they are only limited by probably physical abilities, but they are not limited by intellectual ability.
Mental ability, yeah.
You understand? And sometimes even some of these people have the emotional intelligence to even run these offices that we are talking about. Because one way or the other, they understand probably the pain of others who are not necessarily in their shoes, but because they are in that particular state, they will, there's this empathy from them that you see, manifest even in the ways they interact and display their ability. So this should not be limited to, yes, either male or female, person with disability who has probably been tested, who has a track record of youth engagement, because it's important, like he said, must be a connector, who has emotional intelligence to be also able to relate with the older folks, tap from their knowledge, tap from their wisdom, and of course, look into the future. You see, beyond all this, I think it's also very important that the youth minister must understand the language of the generations that had existed and the current ones, the X, Y, Z, and even the Alpha that we are currently molding. You must understand their language. Because if we say you must have foresight to look into the future, then you must begin to see that, okay, what kind of future should I create for the generation Alpha that I'm looking at now? Now, the generation Z that is currently on board now, they have their way of thinking, and social re-engineering is even key for them. Because the way some of us think, the way some of us express our mind is different from the way some of this generation Z expresses their mind, or the way they, make bold their stand on issues. So an understanding of the psychology of these generations is key for a youth minister to thrive, so that you will not be responding when you are supposed to react, and you will not be reacting when you are supposed to respond, because you are the face and the voice of the youth. You must act accordingly.
All right, quite interesting. And I love all of the analysis that you gave. If you look at the current youth and the role they played in the last election, they appear to be, brash, violent, and they always say, I didn't come with peace, I come with violence. So you now begin to wonder the kind of youth Nigeria is breeding. They don't care whether you are older, they don't care whether you're... So do you not feel that this might be difficult for whoever is going to take on this challenge as a minister of youth, to be able to have, just like he enumerated them, to speak to their minds, to change their orientation? Or is it going to be left to the Minister of Youth, or to our own selves, maybe from the homes that you're from? What do you think, we missed it?
Well, we missed it quite some time back, really, where most of us will tell ourselves at home that what I suffered, I wouldn't want my children to suffer the same thing. We walked to school. We don't want them to walk to school. We give them everything they asked for. And I think that's part of where the problem came. So there's that sense, entitlement mentality with the young ones today. They believe they need it and they must have it. They also have lost certain ethos, so to say. Where I come from, they call it Omoluabi ethos. The issue of respect for the elderly, the issue of empathy, the issue of clarity of mind and understanding others and everything. We've lost it because along the line, some of them were not well raised. And where I come from, I have a statement that the one that didn't wait to take training is now raising an untrained one. So in one word, it just only gets worse. But now we need to begin to re-engineer. It mentioned social engineering. It's all about changing the environment and how the society begins to respond to things, and how do we begin to manage all the challenges we are seeing today. It's actually going to take a bit of time. Like I mentioned something about the cancel culture. If it doesn't go my way, cut it off. If I can't have it, you can't have it. That kind of culture, and where on X today, particularly within our environment, there's no sacredness. There's no sanctity of who you can talk to and what have you. People talk to their grandpa's age mates as if they're just insulting them all over the place. And I think that is something that we need to begin to look at. So the Minister of Youth must come in and also begin to look at how do we re-engineer our society and our social behaviors in a way that our youth can begin to take a different culture from what they have imbibed so far. There's a need to reorientate in that regard. Whether they need to talk to sociologists, anthropologists, and psychologists to see how can we begin to change mindset and social engagement. How do people begin to relate? It wasn't like this before. But that minister needs to come in and begin to see what we need to do. Like I said, right from, my grandmother would say, you manage and prune the Iroko tree from a young seedling, so that when it grows, it will grow straight. But when you allow it to go rudderless, and it becomes ruddy, it becomes something that you can handle when it grows big. So in a way, those are some of the things that we need to begin to look at. Begin to change mindset.
Absolutely.
Social engineering and mindset reorientation is critical. The minister will need to look at that.
It goes to show that there's a lot that the president needs to consider when it comes to selecting who the Minister of Youth would be. We'll definitely continue this conversation. We need to go on a very quick break now. I've been speaking with Abayomi Okeosonyitu, I wanted to say Asiwaju, as well as Kenny Adenugba. Thank you very much, guys. We'll be back. Just stay with us here on Breakfast Show. We'll take a break and be back with more discussion on this.
When you sweat, you lose ions too. Reach for Pocari Sweat, similar to your body fluid. It is easily absorbed and rehydrates you faster. Replenish your ions with Pocari Sweat Iron Supply Drink.
Because no matter where you go, no matter how we be, I go always there for you. Anything where you chop or whatever you drink, I cannot need it back for you. All I ask in return is that you treat me a little better. With eyebrow, toilet cleaner, my hygiene now your own. Eyebrow, toilet cleaner, it's a win-win for me and you. So make we win more.
You're watching TVC Breakfast, and we've been talking about so many issues, especially on the decision of whom becomes the next Minister of Youth Development, which is what the President Bola Tinubu is contending with. And Nigerians have been reacting from different corners, sectors of the section of the country, who should be the Minister of Youth. I've been speaking with the President, Yewa Wari Youth Council, Abayomi Okeosonyitu, and then a strategy consultant and public affairs analyst, Kenny Adenugba. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for your time on Breakfast Show. So we've looked at, we talked about attitude not change, for the youth. We talked about the current Nigerian youth mindset in Nigeria. Talked about people who are looking forward to leave the country because they feel that it's not working for them. But beyond that, whoever is going to take on this position, shouldn't we also consider what they've done before, so that when they are appointed, there won't be a lot of backlash as to, oh, this person was involved in so thing that is not good in terms of character. For instance, we're talking about the current Minister of Arts and Culture, Anatu Musawa. She didn't do anything bad, really, not in terms of character, but the fact that she's a serving core member and now appointed a minister, it has generated a lot of reactions from Nigeria. So what due diligence would you want the president to do before, apart from all of the qualities that you mentioned, you want the president to consider before bringing on whoever who's going to be holding this ministry?
You see, I recall that when I ventured into politics, I was told that if you truly want to hear the story, the real story behind your mother's maybe married to your father and the subsequent delivery of you.
Great grandfather
if you want to, yes,
back in the day.
You would hear it when you put yourself out there in the public space. And that is why it is important that the CNC must ensure that those that will serve the public in different capacities must be well vetted. They must check the antecedents. They must, because we live in a world now that information is at our fingertips. Now, people don't even need to call a press conference again to unveil or reveal the past of people that are in the public offices. They go to the Hex platform. They go to the Blue platform. They go to any of this platform and make such releases. And even before the conventional broadcast organizations lay hand on this thing, it has gone viral. So it simply means that whosoever we want to put in any public office, not just this Ministry of Youth, any public office, we must check the answers. We must ask questions. I recall that when I was running for election then in 2019, and I had to be vetted by the GSS, as we were entering, my friend who happened to be the director of media for my campaign asked me, he pulled me back. He said, is there anything I need to know before we enter there? So that I don't want any form of surprises. And I said, sincerely, my brother, there is nothing to hide. I have never altered or concord or even, in fact, made any alteration to any of my personal details. You know, in Nigeria, you may be forced to doctor your age, your date of birth, just because you needed favor or something. I didn't opt for any of such, because I believe that in the future, some of these things may haunt me, because I know where I'm going. So I decided to just live on a very clean slate. So it's important, beyond checking, for the antecedents when it comes to character and all that, we also must look out for the antecedent of this person in the youth development space. Does this person have an antecedent when it comes to impacting the youth community?
What has the person done?
What has the person done? Does this person even understand youth development as a concept? Has he engaged in activities that has improved the life of young people? Because, people think that by giving out palliatives in the name of palliative now to young people, or you just say, they aid you in your area, they call you Twali Baba, that has made you a youth leader. No, that is not enough to make you what? A youth leader. What is the impact you are making? It is when these young people become adults and they begin to come back and say, if not for you, sir, I wouldn't have become a lawyer today. If not for you, I wouldn't have become this better person that people are now celebrating. If not for you, I wouldn't have begin to make this much impact that I'm making in my community.
Right.
That is when we can say that you have truly impacted the lives of people and you are indeed a youth leader.
Interesting. Kenny, so we started off by looking at exactly what age should the Minister of Youth be. If we had someone who was 60, because others are saying what you've reeled out different proverbs, the Yoruba proverbs, talking about experience. So when we look at experience, is it necessary that the person be between the ages of, let's say, 25 and 30 or 35? Should we basically look at the age? Or even if the person is 70, because we also need experience. Someone who understands the mind of the youth does not necessarily mean that the person should also be within the age bracket of 30 or 45. So what should we look at? What about the experience? He also talked about things that they've done before, things that whoever will be given the mandate must have done before, which will account for what the person will be doing in the times to come. So shouldn't we look beyond the concept of age?
Well, age is something that could mean something to a number of people. It may also not mean much, really. People will say age is just a number. Sometimes I ask myself, okay, how, according to what we read in one of the holy books, or the holy books, so to say, how did a Moses, so to say, and a Caleb, who were probably in their 70s, 80s, lead a generation of 20s, 30s, and they were able to get them to where the promise was going to be at that time? However, That said, today, the demands and the realities of our environment and the future would demand that you don't begin to look at somebody who is in his 60s and what have you, sincerely. Because the realities are different. The mindset, the worldviews are not the same. And where I come from is, say, if you want to catch a monkey, you must act like a monkey sometimes. There are certain ways where you can be able to deal certain people, but you can't deal them to the best of your ability if you don't understand the nuances of that particular group or that generation.
What are these nuances? Is it the lingo that they use?
No, it's not just about it's not just about lingo. I mean, of course, there are people today who are in their 60s who can use the internet more than a number of young people as well. I mean, I have a man who is in his 80s who actually is so savvy with the internet and gadgets. So there are people like that. But like I said, beyond that, you need somebody that the youth can trust. If they can trust a 60-year-old man, fine. But they must be able to say, this person, we can trust this person. We know this person's trajectory, so to say, where this person is coming from, what he has achieved and impacted. It's like, let me give you an example. It's like, say you make a Tony Elumelu Minister of Youth, and what have you. Right. There's a tendency that the youth may say, okay, you know what, we know how he has helped us and how he has groomed and built young people. Right. That is not in his 40s or 50s or thereabouts. Right. But what I'm saying in essence is, it has to be somebody that the youth can actually have absolute trust in and believe that this person can lead us and take us to where we want to be.
Well, it remains to be seen what the president will finally decide at the end of the day, because what we want, it's a better Nigeria, a better representation, whether the age, maybe the person is a man or a woman or person with disabilities, etc. But President Yewa Wori Youth Council, Abayomi or Kashiwaju, I want to thank you for your time, as well as a strategy consultant and public affairs analyst, Kenny Adenuba, the wise man with the wise words.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Thank you.